Hello crafty friends, and welcome to my channel. I'm Adrienne Bosey of Alice Scraps Wonderland. Today I'll be sharing my process of playing with the new Sizzix Studio for the first time, creating this pretty mixed media canvas. Sizzix Studio is a new line of products geared toward mixed media artists, and it was just released earlier this month. While these tools are made for art journalers, it can also be used on canvas and other project bases with dimension. The line has gorgeous stencil and stamp sets, as well as a registration hinge adapter. This adapter can be used to elevate your hinge lid or stencil adapter on the registration tool. If you already have the Sizzix stencil and stamp tool, this hinge adapter works with this tool just as it would on the registration tool. There's also craft tools with palette knives and a blending tool, which are similar to the Sizzix multi-tools, just in a different color, and you can get replacement sponges that fit your blending tool head. I just want to open up some of these boxes so you can see the items. Let's start with the stencil and stamp set, and this particular one was designed by Kerr. I'll be using the stamps from the set in my project. And as always, I'll have all of the products I used linked in the description box below. What you'll notice about these stencils is that there are holes punched on each side of the stencil that allow you to attach it to your stencil adapter in any direction. And here's a closer look at this stamp, which features both icons and text. The hinge adapter comes with a little instruction booklet, but this is super easy to attach, and I'll show that in a minute. In the blending sponge set, you get 4 sponges and 2 replacement Velcro rounds. So let's get into this project. I'll be using my Sizzix multi-tool and my stencil and stamp tool for this project, as I already have these items. Start by taking off the hinge lid on your registration or stencil and stamp tool. Then line up the hinge adapter with the notches pointing toward the workspace of the tool and snap it into place. I'm just showing how that hinge lid fits back into the hinge adapter and the height that allows you to work directly on journals and canvases. But I'm going to start with stencils on this 8x8 inch canvas, so I attach my stencil adapter. Because I'm working right up to the edge of the canvas, I line up the bottom notches of the stencil adapter with the hinge adapter for more stability. And I've also pulled out my multimedia mat to place paints on. I'm starting out with a liquid acrylic paint from Prima Marketing. This thin acrylic paint is buildable and a little goes a long way, but I want to make sure that it glides over the texture of the canvas easily, so I add a few drops of liquid fluid medium to it as well. I give it a little mix, and then I use the blending sponge to apply it through the first layer of the stencil over half of the canvas. Then I flip the canvas over, replace the stencil, and add paint to the other half of the canvas. Next, I am going to apply the Sizzix Effectz Rose Gold Creamy Acrylic through stencil number 2. I put a fresh sponge on my blending tool and apply paint through the stencil in the same way as before, flipping the canvas to cover the entire surface. For the final stencil, I'm using Prima's modeling paste and applying it with the long palette knife. When I flip my canvas around, I didn't want to smush my already stenciled on paste, so I hold up the bottom edge of the stencil while working. I'm just playing here and wanted to see what covering the entire canvas with all 3 stencils would look like, but you'll see that in the end, my own personal eye liked a less busy look. While the canvas dries, I work on stamping. Because I'm doing a canvas with dimensional flowers, I want to float my stamped images amongst the flowers. To achieve this, I stamp on clear acetate, which I know is a little hard to see on camera, but trust me, there is acetate stuck down to the sticky grit on my tool. I used a static brush as I'll be heat embossing, then place some stamps on. I stamped more than I ended up using, and that's because this canvas idea wasn't fully fleshed out in my head yet, and I wasn't sure what I would be using. Sometimes I need to see my options right in front of me. I'm very visual. I stamped with clear embossing ink and then applied Ranger's super fine black embossing powder. Off camera, I cleaned up some of the excess powder that was still stuck to my acetate, though I knew I would be fussy cutting these out, so I wasn't too worried. I used my Sizzix heat tool to emboss the powder. If you decide to do this, make sure that you use a heat-stable acetate. I've got the one I used linked below for you. After heating, I wiped the excess static powder off and then fussy cut the stamped images out with a pair of scissors. Now for assembling all the pretty embellishments and stamped images on this canvas. Since this is a new line that I'm playing with for the first time, I want to show you a bit of my process, so you'll see me dry fitting a couple of different options. I think this gives you an idea of how I play with my options before deciding on a final design. I do this with just about every project, but almost always off camera. While you watch this process, I'll tell you a little bit about the products I'm using along with the Sizzix Studio items. I'm using elements from Prima Marketing's Nature Academia collection. The copper-colored flowers and earthy tones match so well with the paints that I've used for the canvas. I like this corner look with the paper and stamped flowers, but I felt the look was too busy with the fully stenciled canvas. So I moved on to a different layout of the flowers and stamped images, this time trying it down the center. I liked this layout a bit more, but decided I wanted to throw a mold in the mix. This is the Redesign Astrid mold that I've casted with resin. I really like this look with the mold, but I still feel the fully stenciled canvas background is too busy with all of the flowers and everything going on, so I decided to add some torn paper. This is a 12 by 12 sheet from the same Prima collection. I tear off one edge, place the mold over to make sure I get about the right width, then tear off the other side. I placed it over the canvas and liked the look, so I trimmed down the length to 8 inches to fit the canvas. I want to add more dimension, so I placed 2 mm thick foam adhesive onto the back of the paper. Because the canvas has so much texture on it, I added hot glue to the foam to help really stick it to the canvas. I want to frame an element in the mold and pick one of the 3x4 journaling note cards, which you see me pull out there. But this mold needs color, so I start by painting it with the rose gold Sizzix paint I used on the canvas. Then I apply some Prima Marketing wax to the highlights of the mold to bring out the texture and dimension. Now that I have all the major elements, I dry fit again to make sure the frame mold is stable as it floats on top of the flowers. My tip for doing this is to place flowers on opposite sides of your resin or chipboard frames. This will ensure stability of your floating element. Once I know the layout, I begin gluing elements down, starting with the journaling card. I use 1mm thick foam for this. Then I use hot glue to attach the flowers, checking to make sure I'm putting them in the right spot by placing the resin frame on top. After the base layer of flowers is in place, I glue the resin frame down to the flowers with hot glue. I'm starting to play again with more flowers, ephemera, and the stamped images, and while I like the look of the leafy ephemera, I don't want to spend lots of time fussy cutting the white halo out as it clashes with my vision. So I decide to die cut some leaves out from the Sizzix Flower and Fern die set. I'm using another paper from the Prima Nature Academia collection and my Desert Flower sidekick for this. After die cutting a bunch of the leaves out, I add a little shape to them with the shaping kit. Then I distress them a bit by applying some brown Catherine Pooler ink to the edges of the leaves with the blending tool. And I'll just let the rest of this process play out of adding the die cuts, more paper flowers, and the stamped images. I used hot glue and foam adhesive for all of this. I do want to add a little bit of ephemera, so I choose some pieces that don't have any white halos, tucking them into the project. I then add some of the smallest flowers from this collection to fill in any spaces that need it. And finally, I add some crystals from the collection for a bit of extra bling. I hope that this project inspires you to discover the artist in you. Remember, this is all about creative play. Don't forget to like this video and to hit the subscribe button for more content like this. Until next time, happy crafting!